There are transgender kids that will go on to be transgender adults. There is also a contingent of people who are caught up in a social contagion who would not, under normal circumstances, go on to be transgender adults. They would go on to be gay men or women, or they would go on to be just normal adults. And if those people are being sent down the path to transitioning, there's a chance that they will be unhappy.
It's like no one really addresses that this is the trolley problem. It's like people just, they plant their foot on one side or the other.
I don't know if you guys saw this clip that's going viral of a guy that took his kids. He's got 2 boys and he took them to the doctor, and the doctor asked the kids if they were gender fluid, non-binary, or, this list of things, which most parents really don't want their kids being introduced to that kind of stuff. So if you're a parent and you don't want your kid introduced to this stuff, like, you're being forced to fight because this stuff is being forced into your home. So for them, you can't say that it's just a fringe issue, even though trans people are only a small, tiny percent of the population.
This video going around that you're referencing, they're going to a hospital or a doctor's office, and a list asks the child whether or not they're non-binary.
No. The actual doctor did. The general practitioner asked in front of the mother and the 2 kids whether the kids were gender fluid or non-binary, or identified as boys or girls.
And how old was the kid?
I don't remember. I think it was like 13 and 7, but
I mean, again, like, I wouldn't necessarily make that something that I advocate for happening more. Like,
well, no,
it's not.
Hold on. We're kind of getting off in the weeds here. Your personal opinion. I'm just saying, like, if you're a parent and you're worried about a social contagion, and if you've done any of the research on social contagion and understand
I know the theory,
how they will work, anyone standing in a lab coat that's going to, propose this question to you is likely could catch you up in a social contagion. You're going to be very upset that this has happened. So you're going to basically call your representative immediately and say, what the hell is going on? How is this a thing? When did this become the reality that we're living under? So I hear a lot of people saying trans people are only a small percentage of the population. Therefore, it's a fringe issue that none of us have to deal with. That's not true. That's completely not true.
First of all, if I was a 7 or 13-year-old at the doctor's office and the doctor had asked my mom that question, I wouldn't even have known what those words meant. Let alone,
but you're going to go home and you're going to ask your parents, and your parents are going to have to describe this situation to you. And then all of a sudden they're going to be asking their friends, "Hey, do you know about this thing?" And the next thing you know, they're caught up in a social contagion. Like,
well, I mean,
that's how it works.
At some point, every human being has to become aware of aspects of the world that maybe their parents don't want to introduce them to at a certain point. Like, at one point when my sister came home from class and I was in 5th grade, she was like, one of my friends said the F word. And
Gavin, if you went to the doctor and the doctor said, "Have you been saved? Have you accepted Jesus as your own personal savior?" I'm asking you, how would you feel about that? Would you say, they have to have heard of Christianity before, and there's Christmas? And
the reason why I disagree with that is because there is no proof, in my opinion, or evidence of a Christian God. There is
no proof that you are born in the wrong body either. That is the whole contention here.
Adam, there is a scientifically accepted understanding of transgenderism as a real phenomenon, a scientific and medical condition that exists and has existed for fucking all of human history. This is not the same thing as some religious dogma.
Gavin, let me separate it for you, okay? Because I do agree with you. Transgenderism has been around forever, okay? There are transgender people that will go on to be, there are transgender kids that will go on to be transgender adults. There is also a contingent of people who are caught up in a social contagion who would not, under normal circumstances, go on to be transgender adults. They would go on to be gay men or women, or they would go on to be just normal adults. And if those people are being sent down the path to transitioning, there's a chance that they will be unhappy and would rather just go without the transitioning. Those are the 2 cohorts.
Yeah, and I understand that, right? Like I agree. I see that you don't have a problem with the trans community.
No, not at all. Look,
and well,
Brianna Wu has
yeah,
been on the show a number of times. We have had trans people on.
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting any of that. But what I do wonder about is that, yeah, I know you have a genuine like amount of concern for kids that, you know, might accidentally you know, make a decision out of influence from somebody, you know, in a position of power, or to participate in a trend that would become irreversible, right?
Yes,
But
totally.
there is also a fuckload of trans kids that kill themselves all
Mhm.
the time. The statistics are just mind-numbing. If you look at the number of trans people who die before the age of 28, it's extremely alarming, right? And I think in today's culture, until you're about, you know, 30, you're considered like a youth tragedy death, right? And if you look at those numbers, they're absolutely staggering. What I find a little bit like making me skeptical is that I hear so much about what's happening to the kids that decide to transition, the minutia of the kids that decide to transition and then detransition, not nearly as much about the trans kids that never see their 18th birthday because they've killed themselves because of untreated gender dysphoria.
Right. Well, I think the problem is that we have. I mean, it's a classic trolley problem. Okay, because on one hand you have, there's the one track is the kids that will kill themselves because there's a very high rate of suicide for people with gender dysphoria, and then the other track is what is the potential future if there's going to be a high rate of trans regret in the future, which we don't necessarily know because a lot of the studies on desistance rates were pre-affirmative care model, where the desistance rates were very high. That is the rate of children who, once they started to go through puberty, would desist and not have gender dysphoria. They were very high. And then once the affirmative care model kind of got put in place, they became very low. And so it kind of begs, at least in my mind, the question of, what has caused that massive change in desistance rates? And unfortunately, to my knowledge, there's never been like a real study where they said like, okay, let's take two groups of kids who both have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, kind of like you would with a vaccine. And you say we're gonna have a control group, an experimental group, and we're gonna put them on different regimens and see how much does the social transitioning, does puberty blockers, does cross-sex hormones, do these things affect assistance rates in some significant way? And until that's done, I feel like it's that we're kind of operating here in the dark and we're kind of not doing anything safe. But I do understand your point. And Brianna Wu brought this up, when we were talking to her about this, is that, she knows people that have had children who definitely, seem to have gender dysphoria. And if they don't get the treatment, they have a very high likelihood of suicide. But that's the problem. And I just feel like, and I agree that one extent, just I feel like no one really addresses that this is the trolley problem. It's like people they plant their foot on one side or the other, and they act like
they
the other side
pretend the
doesn't
other
exist,
side. Yeah,
essentially.
there you go.
Right. And I guess the way I come at this from is like, one, I'm not a doctor, like Zach said. Two, I'm not a trans person, so I personally haven't dealt with gender dysphoria. I don't really truly understand it the way someone who suffers from that condition would. And again, therefore, I don't really feel comfortable telling people what is the correct medical approach to what is a scientifically and medically observed medical condition, gender dysphoria. Unlike the Christian God or the Bible, this is actually something that is scientifically and medically accepted as being a thing. And on the other side of that coin, I don't think that the government or that the medical establishment should force parents to put their kids through a transition process. If their kid is saying they're trans and their parents are like, well, you need to wait till you're older to make that decision, I don't think it's the government's place to step in and force them to put their kids through that. But I also just don't think it's anyone's role to tell them not to, if that's has been decided upon as the best path forward medically for this issue that the child is dealing with. But that being said, I still think there's a lot of steps that you go through if you are one of the very few underage patients that's receiving this sort of gender affirming care. I think that it's not like you just walk in there and you say, hey, I decided last week that I'm a boy now, so please perform this surgery on me or give me these hormones. Like, I think there is, and if in some cases there's not, there should be like an extensive process where you actually have to sit down with a therapist, be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Like, you can't just go to the doctor and say, hey, give me some Adderall. You have to be diagnosed with like ADHD first or something. And the same way, you can't just go to the doctor and say, hey, give me these hormones. Like, I think you have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. They have to decide that that's the best path for you, and then you'll receive your treatment as a result of said diagnoses. That's how most medical interactions work. I feel like this one is looked at differently because it's new and because it defies some people's understanding of gender ideology, and that can be uncomfortable to people. And I'm obviously not a parent, so I can't speak to that experience of what it would like to be to have a kid that might be experiencing these societal changes as well. But ultimately, like I said, I don't think it's happening on a wide enough scale for it to be fear-mongered about. And I think on the scale that it is happening, those decisions should be left up to a doctor and the family, in the same way that we would leave the decisions to prescribe Adderall to a kid or Ritalin to a kid or any of the other numerous drugs that are given to children all the time for various medical conditions, which we all accept and understand.
Yeah,
Right.
and just
Well,
you
we're going on 2 hours, and we never talked about how long you guys were going to stay. We have plenty of time. Obviously, we're going to stream forever.
I didn't want to be like I definitely don't have to dip right now, but I do normally pick up my girlfriend from work right around like 5:30.
Okay.
But I don't know how much time Gavin has also, and I don't want to interrupt in the middle of
Well, we probably
the
have some
apex of
super
the
chats
discussion.
that are like asking you guys direct questions. So I don't know if
Well,
we should
there
move
was
on or not.
well, okay. I mean, I was going to bring up the whole Kenneth Zucker thing, but I don't want to get bogged down in the trans conversation because I feel like
I feel like there's a lot of agreement between us anyway. So
well, there is agreement, but there's also, I mean, we emphasize different things.
well, we can always have another conversation about this in the future if you want.
Right.
Oh yeah, we're
Right.
definitely down for round 2. We're definitely not having a bad
well,
time
okay.
chatting with you guys.
Right.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.